China wants to build a training center in Cuba, and I think we've just reached a whole new level of oh crap. Now, as the whole world worried about Taiwan, including the US military, I think there's a lot of legitimacy in worrying about Taiwan. You have a lot of economic issues here, and you have a lot of humanitarian issues here, but nonetheless, China going after Cuba, again, this is a whole new level of it can get real fast. Now, I wanted to give you a comparison on how far China is from the United States and how far Cuba is from the United States. So real quick, China is 7,000 miles away from mainland United States. And although I know a lot of you are saying, look, this doesn't matter if China is able to send hot air balloons over the United States or spy balloons, but again, that's 7,000 miles away, and it does take a few days, maybe even a week for that to happen. But let's see how far Cuba is from the United States. Now, you ready for this one? Cuba is only 90 miles away from Florida. 90 miles compared to 7,000 miles. And not only that, if you travel at 20 miles an hour with a crappy fishing boat, you can get to Florida in 4 hours. Now, I can only assume China has some pretty fast boats out there that can go a little quicker than 20 miles an hour. And if you think any of this is the worst part, of course, as China and the United States were somewhat making progress, at the time of making this video, President Biden called the president of China a bully, and now China is officially pissed off at us again. Now, I swear we will get to Cuba, but you need to understand this. China, throughout the last few years, has been really on this economic push and partner push to really become friends with every country ever, to try changing their currency to the Chinese currency. And the thing that's interesting about China and their policies is that China doesn't want to implement their culture on their country. China wants to build a few roads, they will build a crappy university for you, but nonetheless, you have a university, you have a road, you guys figure it out, but let us operate in your country. Now, this is a strategic part of Africa on the western side of Africa, the Gulf of Guinea. Now, the thing that's important about this area is that China is trying to build a bunch of seaports in this area, deep, warm water ports, where they will have total access to the Atlantic Ocean. The reason why this is a really big deal is because China has never really had that much access to the Atlantic Ocean. They've always had the ability of free trade in international waters, but never the ability to have 24-hour access all the time. Warships, submarines, doesn't matter. They could now have access to the Atlantic seaboard, which means the US Navy, US Coast Guard, everyone's going to be on high alert at all times, especially if China is able to pull off all of these seaports on the western side of Africa. And you know what the worst part about all of this is? We don't necessarily know exactly what's going on with Cuba, with China. We don't know what the details are of this military base. We don't know what Cuba is going to allow China to do in Cuba. What we do know is there is some sort of negotiations going down, and China has shown a lot of interest in Cuba, and Cuba has shown a lot of interest in China. So we could only assume Cuba is going to be totally okay with China coming into Cuba and building some sort of military partnership again within Cuba. Now, as far as President Biden calling the president of China a dictator, I'm actually okay with that. The only thing is the timing is not that good here. And let me explain. At the time of making this video, if you guys are not aware, the United States finally talked to China. And the last time we talked to China was back in 2018. And essentially, China was boasting that, hey, we are making progress with the United States. And the United States was boasting, hey, we are making progress with China. And then not only 24 hours later, Biden's like, no, she's a dictator though. Now look, I'm the last person to stick up for the CCP. I'm just trying to report the news here. But you gotta have a little bit of, tactical timing maybe? Look, I understand we are not the best of friends with China, but maybe just pretend to be friends with them. Don't go to their house, act like you are making progress, and then all of a sudden be like, yeah, but I actually don't like you guys. I mean, come on, Biden, what are you doing? And look, we all know President Xi is kind of like a little bit of a baby here. I mean, he banned Winnie the Pooh within China. Look this up and fact check me. He banned Winnie the Pooh in China because he's afraid that people will bully him and say that he looks like Winnie the Pooh. So to be fair, this guy is actually really a softie, even though they act really tough. But again, we have to give credit to China. They are making massive grounds and moves around the world. They are really picking up their partnerships with countries that would have never aligned with the United States, but there's always a way we can find some sort of partnership. With China, it has nothing to do with culture and bringing over Chinese culture to those countries. Again, China is all about building roads, building fake infrastructures that are probably going to fall apart in 20 years, and then China will operate within your country. Now, look, at the end of the day, the big news story here is that China wants to operate in Cuba. And I think this is going to be keeping a lot of people busy, especially with the Coast Guard down near Florida. Now, look, I am not implying that China is going to use this as an attack base on the United States. But what I am saying is China is now closer than ever to the United States. Look, Russia is technically 50 miles away from Alaska, but that's not the mainland of the United States. And we do have a little bit of buffer with Canada, even though China technically broke that buffer with their space balloon. I keep calling it a space balloon, their spy balloon. So again, I think we do need to be careful and cautious, and I do think we need to monitor the situation because this can get serious real fast, especially if you know your history all the way back in the 60s with the whole Russia going to Cuba themselves and possibly sending nukes over to Cuba. So we shall see what happens. I already assume a lot of people are saying this is the United States' fault for not just working with Cuba and trying to partner with Cuba after all of these years. The United States has been known to put an embargo on Cuba, thus pretty much severing ties with Cuba. But again, nonetheless, let me know what you guys think on this news story. I think it can get pretty real pretty fast, and I think this is very serious. So again, let me know what you guys think. My name is T-SPLY. Leave your comments and opinions down below, and we'll see you later.